It didn't start with a fall, or a sharp pain, or a trip to the emergency room. It started the way so many things do, after 80, quietly. A little tug in my left knee when I stood up, a dull stiffness in my fingers when I tried to button my shirt, a pause at the top of the stairs because I wasn't sure how strong my legs felt that day. At first I brushed it off. You're just tired. Maybe you slept funny? Give it a few days? But days became weeks, and what was once a small ache began to follow me, down the hallway, into the kitchen, into bed. I'd wake up with it, walk with it, sit with it, sleep with it. It wasn't screaming pain, it was whispering pain, and that whisper followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I tried all the usual things, pain relievers, anti-inflammatories, creams that burned cold, then hot, then nothing at all. Physical therapy, stretching, movement. Some days I felt a shift, but most days I didn't. I went from one doctor to another, from one, maybe this will help, to another, sorry, that's all we can do. They told me it was part of aging, and for a long time I believed them. I stopped walking as far, stopped cooking as much, stopped saying yes when neighbors invited me for tea. Every movement felt like a negotiation. Every day I lost a little more of my body and a little more of myself. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the waiting, waiting for a good day, waiting for the pain to go away, waiting for something, anything to work. And when nothing did, I stopped waiting. I told myself, maybe this is just how it's going to be. Maybe I had reached the chapter of life where the body simply lets go. I stopped fighting. I stopped hoping. I didn't talk about it with anyone, not even with Helen, my niece, who calls me every weekend. Because how do you say, I'm tired of hurting, without sounding like you've given up? And, truthfully, I had. Not in a dramatic way, but in the small ways that matter. I moved slower, sat longer, let the world shrink around me. Until one morning, I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of tea and realized something chilling. I hadn't laughed in weeks. I hadn't hummed while making toast. I hadn't looked forward to anything. Pain didn't take that from me all at once. It took it piece by piece while I wasn't looking. And that was the moment, not a fall, not a diagnosis, not a crisis, just a quiet knowing that I had stopped living long before I stopped moving. That Sunday Helen called, as she always does. She never forgets, even if I say I'm fine in every conversation, even if I pretend the weather is all we need to talk about. She has that gentle way of noticing things I don't say, of pausing just long enough between sentences to give silence a space to speak. That morning my voice must have betrayed me, because after I mentioned I hadn't walked much lately, she asked softly, "Uncle, are your knees still hurting?" I hesitated, then answered the way most older folks do when we're tired of explaining pain. "A bit." She was quiet for a moment, then said almost casually, "Have you ever tried turmeric?" I blinked. Turmeric? The spice? The one in the dusty glass jar I bought 15 years ago after trying an Indian curry recipe that didn't turn out well. I chuckled. "Yes," I said. "It's somewhere at the back of the cupboard." Helen smiled. "Well," she said, "maybe it's time to pull it out." I wanted to say no, to tell her I'd tried everything, that spices don't fix bones, that no yellow powder can reverse a decade of pain. But instead I asked, "Why turmeric?" And she told me about an article she'd read, about how turmeric's main ingredient, curcumin, helps reduce inflammation, about how it's been used for centuries in traditional medicine, not as a miracle, but as a helper, a quiet supporter of the body's own healing. She wasn't pushy, she wasn't preaching, she just said, it might not change everything, but it could change something. That night I stood in front of my kitchen shelf, searching, and there it was, that old jar, still half full, the label slightly faded, the color still vibrant, like sunshine trapped in powder. I held it in my hands, stared at it longer than I'd like to admit. It felt foolish, but it also felt curious. So I opened the jar, took a small breath in, and for the first time in a long time, not out of desperation, but out of quiet defiance, I decided to try. Not because I believed it would fix everything, but because something in me whispered, "You're still allowed to care for yourself." That night I sat down with my notebook and began searching online, not for magic cures, not for testimonials, but for knowledge. I found studies, some promising, some cautious. I read about how curcumin blocks molecules that fuel chronic inflammation, the silent kind that wears away at joints and energy and hope. One doctor had said, "Turmeric isn't a miracle, but it's one of the gentlest natural anti-inflammatories we know. And sometimes that gentleness is exactly what the body needs." I didn't know if it would help me. But I knew this. It couldn't hurt more than doing nothing had. And maybe, just maybe, it would remind my body and my spirit that healing doesn't have to be loud to be real. I didn't sleep right away that night, not because of the pain, but because of something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time, a gentle anticipation, like the night before a quiet trip, like I was doing something just for me. So I got up, went to the kitchen, and began. No big gestures, no fancy tools, just one small pot, a wooden spoon, and the ingredients I had on hand. 1 cup of oat milk, unsweetened, 1 level teaspoon of turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, half a teaspoon of coconut oil, and a little bit of grated ginger. I didn't measure everything perfectly. I wasn't trying to be exact. I was trying to be present. I poured the milk into the pot and watched it warm slowly, the turmeric spreading like golden silk. The pepper floated, the ginger swirled, the oil shimmered near the edges. The smell filled the air, earthy, warm, old. I stirred gently, not letting it boil, just until steam rose like breath. And then I poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle and the word peace faded on the side. I sat by the window, held the mug in both hands, and drank. It wasn't delicious, it wasn't awful. It tasted like something ancient, like a story my body already knew. And as the warmth moved down my throat, I felt something soften. Not the pain, not yet, but something deeper. A sense that I had done something kind for the person I had been forgetting, myself. I didn't expect anything, didn't sit there waiting for my knees to feel brand new. I just finished my drink, washed the mug, and went to bed. The sheets felt the same. The room was still cold, but inside me there was a shift. A quiet voice saying, "You showed up tonight, not for the pain, but for the person feeling it." And that made all the difference, because when you've spent years managing symptoms, tracking pills, enduring procedures, you forget what it feels like to do something with no pressure, no timeline, no expectation, just a small act of care, a gesture of peace. That night I didn't sleep through, but I did sleep easier, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up dreading the day. I woke up curious, not about whether the pain was gone, but about whether I could show up again that night, just as gently, just as patiently, just for me. The next morning I didn't leap out of bed, but I also didn't groan. I sat up slowly, like I always do, expecting that familiar tightness in my lower back and that dull ache in my knees that usually greeted me before my feet even touched the floor. But it wasn't there, or at least, not as loud. I stood, carefully, not with confidence, but not with fear either, and I noticed something. I didn't reach for the edge of the dresser to steady myself like I always had. I just stood. I thought it was a fluke, a coincidence. Maybe I'd slept in a better position. Maybe the weather was milder. But by mid-morning, while walking to the kitchen, I stepped up the small threshold without thinking. No wince, no second guess. I paused, turned around, looked at the floor like it had betrayed me for not reminding me to be afraid. That day, I made my tea standing instead of leaning against the counter. I opened the peanut butter jar without having to tap it with a knife first. I didn't celebrate, didn't call anyone, didn't even let myself believe it fully. Because hope, at my age, can be as heavy as the pain it tries to replace. But that evening, I stirred my golden milk again, this time with a different kind of attention, less doubt, more listening. I wasn't expecting miracles, but I was noticing. And that noticing felt like something sacred, a quiet conversation between me and my body, one I hadn't had in years. On the third day, I opened the window in my bedroom without having to massage my fingers first. I bent down to pick up a dropped sock without gripping the nightstand. I walked to the mailbox and back without sitting down afterward. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even obvious. But inside me, something was softening, and not just in my joints, in my fear, in my hesitation, in that quiet voice that had been saying for so long, "Be careful. Don't trust your legs. Don't move too much." That voice was quieter now, and in its place, another voice began to whisper, "Maybe it's okay to try again." That night I lit a candle beside the stove as I stirred, just because. I let the ginger simmer a bit longer. I poured the milk slower. I held the cup in both hands like it was something holy. And as I drank, I didn't ask for healing. I simply said, inside my own mind, "Thank you for showing up again today." It was on the fifth evening when something unexpected happened. I was in the kitchen, preparing my usual bowl of warm oats, when I caught myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I was humming, just quietly, a tune I didn't even recognize, but it was there. A soft melody under my breath as I stirred the spoon. It wasn't the act of humming that struck me, it was the way my body felt when I did it. My shoulders moved, subtly. My feet shifted side to side. My hips loosened just enough to sway ever so slightly to a rhythm I didn't even know I remembered. I stopped, not out of pain, but out of surprise. I stood still, staring at the steam rising from the pot, and realized I hadn't danced in over a decade. Not formally, not with music playing loud, but not even in that way we all do sometimes, when something good is cooking and your body joins the joy. That small motion, that gentle unconscious sway, felt like my body remembering what it meant to live, not just survive. And more than that, it felt safe. Safe to move, safe to feel, safe to trust my legs, my balance, my presence in space. I didn't keep dancing, didn't go twirling around the kitchen. I just stood there, softly stunned by how natural it had been. That evening, as I prepared my turmeric drink, I didn't measure anything. I didn't worry about the temperature. I let the process carry me, and as the golden milk warmed, so did something in me. I realized this wasn't just about less pain, it was about less fear. Fear had lived in my body for too long. Fear of moving, fear of slipping, fear of trusting myself. And now my body was whispering back, "I remember." I remember how it feels to rise without bracing. I remember how it feels to bend without calculating. I remember how it feels to sway just because the soup is warm and the music in the room is soft and the moment is mine. These weren't big milestones. No one would have clapped for them. But I noticed. And that noticing, that sacred, quiet noticing, was everything. I didn't tell anyone, not Helen, not my neighbor, not the kind woman at the pharmacy who always asks if I'm sleeping okay. Because this wasn't a success to share, it was a secret between me and a body I was finally starting to trust again. By the end of the first week, I stopped thinking of turmeric as a remedy. It didn't feel like treatment anymore. It felt like something else, something softer, a ritual, a quiet promise I made to myself every evening. I wasn't chasing a cure. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I was just showing up. Showing up for the body that had carried me through wars, heartbreak, retirement, birthdays, funerals, and Sunday mornings alone with the birds. A body I had ignored, criticized, and blamed for slowing down, and now I was finally learning to thank it. Each time I stirred that golden milk, I wasn't fighting the pain. I was listening to it, not in fear, but in companionship. I realized I had spent years treating my body like a failing machine, always managing it, trying to fix it, getting frustrated when it didn't respond. But never once had I asked it, "What do you need from me?" That cup of turmeric milk wasn't powerful because of the curcumin. It was powerful because of the care, because of the attention, because for 10 minutes a day, I wasn't someone in pain. I was someone being kind to himself. And strangely enough, that kindness started doing something that medicine hadn't. It made me feel human again, less like a patient, more like a person with agency, with choice, with tenderness. I still had stiffness some mornings, still took my time with the stairs, still had nights where I turned over in bed a little too slowly. But those things no longer felt like signs of failure. They felt like parts of my rhythm, a rhythm I could now hear, because I was finally listening. Turmeric didn't erase my age. It didn't give me back my 30s, but it gave me back something far better, a relationship with my own body that wasn't built on punishment or disappointment, but on care. And in that care, I rediscovered something else too, hope. Not the kind that clings to a miracle, but the kind that grows quietly, like light at the edge of a window at dawn. I've learned something important in these quiet nights, sitting with my golden mug, watching steam rise like breath from the past. Relief doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives so gently, you almost miss it. It's in the way you rise from a chair without gripping the table, the way you walk to the mailbox and realize you didn't brace for it. It's in the soft return of simple things, making your bed, watering the plants, tying your shoes without bargaining with your knees. And it's in the moments no one sees, not the doctor, not the pharmacist, not even the family who loves you. Only you feel it. Only you know how monumental it is to wake up and not dread the first step. These aren't stories people write books about. They won't go viral. They won't make headlines. But they matter. Because for people like me, for people living quietly with daily pain, these moments are victories. They're not just about the body. They're about the spirit, the soul that had grown quiet, the breath that had become shallow. Now, it's deeper. I breathe more freely, not just because the inflammation is easing, but because I'm no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. That alone feels like a kind of healing no pill ever gave me. And the most beautiful part? It didn't come from something new. It came from something old, something familiar, a spice forgotten at the back of the cupboard, a memory tucked into the kitchen, a ritual that slowly became a return to self. Turmeric didn't change my life overnight, but it changed my nights and my mornings and the way I walk through both. It reminded me that even now, even at 84, my body is still responding, still listening, still willing to heal if I give it a reason. So I did, and it did. If you're still here listening to my story, I want you to know something. This isn't about turmeric. It never really was. It's about remembering that you matter, that your pain is real, that your small efforts, your sips, your steps, your quiet decisions, they add up. Not always loudly, not always quickly, but steadily. You're not broken, you're not too late, and you're not alone. I know what it's like to feel like your body has turned against you, to feel like every solution is temporary, to wonder if there's anything left that hasn't already been tried and failed. But what if relief didn't come from trying harder, but from trying gentler? What if it wasn't about fixing everything, but about showing your body, with quiet rituals and small kindnesses, that you're still here, still listening, still willing, still hopeful? That's what this journey gave me. Not a cure, but a conversation, a relationship. And every time I lift that warm golden cup to my lips, I remember I still belong to this life, to this moment, to this breath. And so do you. So if you're hurting, in your knees, your back, your fingers, or just in the weight of each day, don't give up on yourself. Try something small, something ancient, something that reminds you that even now, you are worth the effort. Not for the pain, but for the person feeling it. And if this story stirred something in you, if a part of you whispered, maybe, just maybe, then stay with us. Subscribe to Senior Fit, where we believe growing older doesn't mean giving up. It means growing wiser, softer, stronger, and still beautifully alive. You've walked a long way to get here, and there's still more road ahead. Let's keep walking it together.